Welcome to Mountain Strong. Today I am at Nancy Lake, which is about an hour north of Anchorage, Alaska, where I live, and getting a chance to see a very popular recreational site here in Anchorage. During the summertime, everybody takes to the lakes, and you can tell why, especially on a day like today. You might not think much about 80 degrees or so, but when it gets up to 80 degrees in Alaska, I don't know if it's the angle of the sun or what, but it is truly hot. And so it's nice to be able to come to the lake and feel the spray of the water and a cool breeze coming across. Well, I won't say that's a cool breeze, but something like that anyway. Getting a chance to spend some time with one of the church families here in the city of Anchorage, or from the city of Anchorage, and they have a cabin out here that we're getting to check out. And so I took an opportunity to walk out back of the cabin. This isn't Nancy Lake behind me, it's actually a pond, and good place though to have another look at a psalm. Let's have a look at Psalm 77 today. I cry aloud to God, and He will hear me. In the day of my trouble I seek the Lord. In the night my hand is stretched out without wearying. My soul refuses to be comforted. When I remember God, I moan. When I meditate, my spirit faints. You hold my eyelids open. I am so troubled that I cannot speak. I consider the days of old, the years long ago. I said, let me remember my song in the night. Let me meditate in my heart. Then my spirit made a diligent search. Will the Lord spurn forever and never again be favorable? Has His steadfast love forever ceased? Are His promises at an end for all time? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has He in anger shut up His compassion? Then I said, I will appeal to this, to the years of the right hand of the Most High. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old. I will ponder all your work and meditate on your mighty deeds. Your way, O God, is holy. What God is great like our God? You are the God who works wonders. You have made known your might among the peoples. You, with your arm, redeemed your people, the children of Jacob and Joseph. When the waters saw you, O God, when the waters saw you, they were afraid. Indeed, the deep trembled. The cloud poured out water, the skies gave forth thunder. Your arrows flashed on every side. The crash of your thunder was in the whirlwind. Your lightnings lighted up the world. The earth trembled and shook. Your way was through the sea, your path through the great waters, yet your footprints were unseen. You led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. As we begin to reflect upon the words of this psalm together, you notice that the psalmist is clearly facing a pretty terrible time. In verses 1 through 3, he describes that time. He describes crying out to God. He describes how he's got his hand sort of stretched out without wearying to God, just waiting for God to take a hold of his hand and to pull him out of the pit that he feels he is in. But when he thinks about this, when he meditates upon God, he moans and he faints. And I want you to think about that, because the psalmist pauses there. And notice how the meditation, the inward reflection, changes what the psalmist is thinking about. So he turns inward and therefore away from God. His eyelids are open. He can't sleep in verse 4. He feels so terrible that he cannot speak, and so he's thinking about this. And notice what he does in verse 5. He considers the days of old. We've talked before about the danger of nostalgia on this program, and how nostalgia, it can be a very dangerous thing in the life of faith. And it seems to be that that's what's happening here in the psalmist's mind. Instead of continuing his prayer to God, he turns inward, he meditates, and he reflects upon the past. He thinks about the days of old, the years long ago in verse 5, and what does he think as a consequence? Because he thinks about those things, he says, is this going to be the way it is forever? Will God ever change these circumstances? Will things ever get better? In verses 7 through 9, he feels as though God has forgotten to be gracious, that God has forgotten to manifest his goodness toward him. And of course, again, all of that came because the psalmist began to think inwardly rather than to continue to reach his hand forth to God. Notice how there's another pause there. After that pause, he does something that's incredibly important and something that we really need to highlight from this psalm. You see, sometimes when we're looking backwards, we remember the good of the past. We remember all the good things that happened in the past. But really, from the standpoint of the life of faith, instead of looking at the good of the past, what should we be looking at? We should be looking at the God of the past. The God of the past who granted that good. And if we look back and we see the God of the past, that's where nostalgia has value. That's where we can see how powerful and how wonderful our God has been, and therefore we can have assurance of how powerful and wonderful He's going to be in the future. And I love how in the verses that follow, that thought is borne out. He says in verses 11 and 12 that he's thinking about God, remembering His deeds, pondering His work, meditating upon that, rather than simply meditating inwardly. He's thinking now about God. He's thinking about something that's helpful in this circumstance. And when he thinks about God, what does he see? He sees that he has every reason to be amazed and that God is amazing, but he also sees that God helped him. And God is consistent. He's faithful. And if God has helped me in the past, what's He going to do in the future? He's going to help me in the future. He's allowing me to endure this circumstance for this time. I don't know why, but I know what He's done in the past, and therefore I know that deliverance is going to await in my future. And maybe I don't feel like I've ever lived a life where I've experienced deliverance. Well, look in the past beyond myself. Look at what God has done for His people in verse 15. His arm redeemed His people. The children of Jacob and Joseph were helped by Him. God has helped others, and therefore He can help me. And I love how this psalm, a psalm spoken out of despair, then remembers when God did something truly amazing. In verses 16 through 20, we find in very poetic language what I believe to be the parting of the Red Sea. If God could take an ocean and cause it to divide in half so that His people could cross, well, what obstacle is going to overcome or defeat me? What obstacle in front of me is going to keep me from progressing forward to be with my God in heaven one day? And the answer is that there is no obstacle that God will not remove. What a blessing to serve such a wonderful God. And so when you're facing a terrible time, I want to again reiterate that point. I want you not to think merely of the good of the past, but think of the God of the past, and think about the God who has been the author of every good and perfect gift that's ever come into your life. Will He deliver you? Will He help you? He always has. He always will. He always helps His people. And even when the obstacles seem truly tremendous, God is there and able to overcome them. May God bless you today.